Well, our next guest probably doesn't need too much of an introduction if you don't know her from the big screen. Actually, in this room, you probably know her more for her longtime activism for women's rights, sexual and reproductive health rights around the world. I'd like to welcome to the stage UNFPA Goodwill Ambassador, Ashley Judd.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Well, so we are here today to talk about sexual and reproductive health rights. This is an issue that is really personal to you. You've invested a lot of your time, money, resources, platform over the years on this. In our previous panel, we talked a little bit about the personal push and call for many of our panelists and why these are really issues that hit home. Could you talk a little bit about why this is such an important issue for you and that you are devoting so much of your passion and time towards it?
Sure, I'd be glad to. First of all, it's good to be in community with you, and I always appreciate UNFPA's confidence in me. I've got the best boss, Dr. Natalia. And, first of all, I would start personally with my own abortion story. A man raped me in 1998, and that resulted in conception. And I was very relieved and grateful that I had access to safe and legal abortion. And it was exceptionally important because rapists have paternity rights in Kentucky and Tennessee. So that's one reason. And another reason is that I see so much suffering in the world. I've now been to 22 countries, from Bangladesh to Nicaragua to South Sudan to Ukraine to Madagascar, and unregulated fertility and family size and the lack of ability to plan and space the births of children just leads to so much suffering. There are 121 million unintended pregnancies every single year. That's a lot of children and a lot of healthcare, poverty, mental illness, mental health related burden and inability to participate in the labor force, child marriage, consequences for girls and women. And, I can tell you about my friend Bijou in Congo, who had an unintended pregnancy, and she experimented with an abortion that turned out to be unsafe. And she was on the back of a motorbike for 3 days with her innards falling out, trying to get to healthcare. So it's about alleviating suffering and allowing women and girls to access poverty alleviation and participate in the labor force.
Yeah, and as we've seen here in the U.S., reversal Roe v. Wade, making abortion illegal doesn't stop it. It can just make it unsafe. And for many people in the world, it's not just legal barriers, it's cultural barriers, structural barriers, access to information and services. So why is that so critical? And what are some of the consequences of that and some of the causes from the work that you've been doing?
Well, you said it very well. Just because abortion becomes illegal doesn't mean that abortion stops. And with so many unintended pregnancies, 60% of those unintended pregnancies do end in abortion, 45% of which are unsafe, which contributes to maternal mortality, which leaves their existing children as orphans or vulnerable children. And I think that's something that we often fail to mention, the vulnerability of those children who are left behind, because most of those girls and women already have children. And in so many of the places where I work, pregnancy starts at the age of 12 because there's so much sexual coercion and rape, or, child marriage. And we need to make family planning universally accessible. It needs to be voluntary, of course. And, there are 220 million women in developing economies who don't have access to family planning. So all of these solutions have to go together. And, I think it's just so simply said that just because abortion becomes illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't stop.
So you spend a lot of time in the Congo, where the status of women and girls is quite low. How do you go about tackling these challenges? What are you seeing working? What are the challenges? But what are some of the opportunities there?
When I started working in Congo in 2008, 92% of girls and women did not have access to family planning. That's such a tragic number. And it's improved a little bit, but where I work in particular is in the Central African rainforest, where it takes 2 days to get there. fewer white people have been to outer space than have been to where we
Wow,
go.
that's quite a
And
stat.
UNFPA was good enough to send a doctor with me and another UNFPA staff member. And we just did listening circles and sharing circles with, first of all, we had to get, the cooperation and permission, which we absolutely had, of the tribal elders and the clan chiefs. And then we started listening. And it turns out that both men and women did want to plan and space the births of their children. They wanted to reduce maternal mortality, and they were very interested in family planning. Some because they had, been able to ride a motorbike several hours away, many, many hours away to a clinic. They were familiar with injectables, and they had some sophisticated language like birth intervals. And so with UNFPA, we're installing the first ever maternal health clinic this fall. And it's very slow, but it's all with their permission and with their, with their participation, and we'll see how it goes.
And I know we have some photos that you were kind enough to share that maybe we can put on the screen just to kind of show. And
so this is a typical family. They do practice polygamy, and this is just, this is actually kind of a small family. They eat one meal a day, and the papas eat the best nutrition and then complain about how their children are malnourished. So that's a traditional gender role that they're starting to renegotiate. This is the population council with the local member of parliament, Papa Albert. And you'll notice that some women are there, and they started to speak up. And this was really dynamic when they were really starting to share. And of course, everybody applauds after they speak. And she's like, you go for your walk, then you come home and you drink and you smoke, and then you beat me. And the men were clapping because everybody claps after everyone speaks. And this is the mama sharing circle where they were talking about, losing 3 and 4 children in maternal health and maternal crises.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that bringing men into the conversation, and particularly the cultural context. Wouldn't it be assumed that we're supportive of expanding access to reproductive rights? But that's the case. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how you bring that into your programming and thinking about both men and women.
Well, curiously, in Kokolapori, and I'm a woman's woman, I didn't know any women until I went in for the month of June. This is typically where a woman gives birth in Kokolapori. This is the bed where they deliver, because they're always in the forest foraging for caterpillars and mushrooms. They are foraging for wood. They're at the river hauling water, or they're inside their huts over smoking fires, minding up to 18 children each. And it was only when we did the sharing circles that the women came out, and I started to get to know them personally. Mm-hmm. But so it was the men with whom I was speaking, our trackers, because we follow the bonobos, the grade 8 species, who are egalitarian, matriarchal, free from male sexual violence and dominance, because they're undergirded by strong female coalitions. And it was the trackers with whom I was chatting in the forest about family planning, and they were the ones expressing their desire for planning family size and birth intervals. And that's what gave me the courage to ask UNFPA to come to Kokolapori.
So we need to be more like the bonobos. That's what you're saying.
Yes, we need to be more like the bonobos.
So if you don't mind talking a little bit about this experience, actually my colleague Catherine in a previous panel shared her birth experience and how that was a real awakening to some of the injustices and inequities. You too had an experience in Congo, a not positive experience, an accident that quite injured, where you had a real up close experience with what healthcare looks like in that kind of context. Would you mind talking a little bit about that experience and how it has shaped how you think about approaching these challenges there?
Sure. So as I said, we study, my partner and I study and follow the very endangered bonobos, who happen to be our closest living relatives. We're slightly more closely related to them than we are the female beating chimpanzees. And I was walking in the rainforest in the dark, as is my wont, but I tripped over a Lakuru root, and my leg broke in 4 places and my foot paralyzed. And I laid on the rainforest floor for 5.5 hours before a man named Papa Jean came. My leg was shaped like a boomerang, and he had to reset the bones of my leg with his bare hands in order for me to be placed in a piece of fabric and transported out of the rainforest to our camp. And what this really vividly, as you can imagine, demonstrated to me is that when there's no local health infrastructure, the suffering that I had in my body is so extraordinary and so agonizing and so visceral. And if I had not had $30, I would have, first of all, lost my leg and been an amputee, which I almost was anyway. and I would have hemorrhaged to death. But the difference was that I did have $30. My Congolese brothers carried me out of the rainforest and eventually to a motorbike where I had to hold the bones of my legs together for 6 hours, bouncing through, the rainforest on a rough trail. But because I had the $10 to pay for fuel in the motorbike, $10 to pay Papa DDA to drive the motorbike, and $10 to pay Papa Maradona to hold me up in case I lost consciousness, I was able to be evacuated eventually to a grass field where a bush plane came to get me. And eventually 67 hours later, I got medical help. But that was because I had $30. And if not, I was just a Congolese person with a Congolese fate.
And so in your role with UNFPA and thinking about wearing your UNFPA hat, how do you go about solving those challenges? You said $30 doesn't sound like a lot. Imagine it's much more than just getting those resources there. How are you all thinking about working in such complicated contexts like Congo, the many places that UNFPA works, and solving some of these?
So partnerships were mentioned, and I do think it is about partnerships. And I also think it's about fundamentally caring. It's about fundamentally caring for people and knowing that they deserve our attention, they deserve our time. And, I ended up there because bonobos are male coercion free, and I wanted to go see them. And I keep going back because I love bonobos, but I also care deeply about the people, that they deserve to have the medical, they deserve to have the health interventions happen in ways that are appropriate for them. And UNFPA is culturally sensitive and does it all voluntarily. And so this will come together in an appropriate way. But now I'm reaching out to Totsten. I sat with Molly yesterday, and I'm going to go to her cultural training in Senegal so that I can work with the people of Kokolapori appropriately. And then it will be the partnerships, reaching out to Gates Foundation and seeing what else we might be able to do in Kokolapori. So I can't be all things to all people, but I can be something to somebody.
And as we've talked about in the earlier part of the programming, health indicators across the world have really taken a huge hit since COVID. This week, all these leaders here are talking about these issues. What do you want to see come out of it? And are you hopeful that we have the right momentum to actually improve some of these indicators that have really, you probably have better stats than I do on some of the data of what it looks like out there. Is there hope?
We have to center girls and women. So I love the director of the World Health Organization. I'm surprised, as Bono said last night, he doesn't have arrows in his back from everything that comes at him. And yesterday he was asked, what are your if you could have 3 wishes for the World Health Organization? And I was just in my seat going, come on, girls and women, come on, girls and women. It didn't quite come out of his mouth. But as Cheryl Wudun and Nicholas Kristof wrote, women hold up half the sky. And so we must center girls and women in our agenda, because if they're having 121 million unintended pregnancies a year, the consequences for them and their health and their ability to participate in a robust economy and their families, and the consequences for climate are absolutely catastrophic. And we see this in the rainforest. We see the pressure on the rainforest. We see the pressure on deforestation. We see how exhausted they are. They can't do anything else except mind their children, and their bodies just absolutely give out. So that to me is really the solution, is centering girls and women and making them adhere in those SDGs 3 and 5 in all that we try to do.
And you have a new initiative in the Congo where you're trying to do just that. Can you just give us a little bit more information about this new initiative?
So that's what I was talking about in Kokolapori. So we're actually, as I said, it takes 2 days to get there, but we have the help of a member of parliament who we're going to put all the equipment on a dugout canoe. It goes upriver for 3 weeks, and then piece by piece, it goes on motorbikes that go through the rainforest for 10 days. And that's how we'll get the equipment there. It's not just an underserved community. There's no government presence. There's no NGO. There's nothing there, but we're going to do our best to help women not die giving life.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your story, sharing your time with us, and best of luck to you in your future.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your time and attention.